Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
Hello, this is Paul Bromwell, and welcome to Arn. Of course, we couldn't do it without the founder of the Four Horsemen, the creator of the Spine Buster, the Hall of Famer, the man who always started the war games. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you the Enforcer AA, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you this week?
I'm doing very good. Welcome.
Yeah.
Guest host extraordinaire. It's always great to work with you.
Thank you so much, Arn. I'm glad to be here, and you're getting me not just 1 week, but 2 weeks. So whether you like it or you don't like it, as the Nature Boy said, you got to learn to love it at least for 2 weeks, huh?
Yeah, it's a very busy season, and we're moving things around and appearing in different places, and things are looking good for our little network of podcasts these days.
It is. You're right. There's a lot going on. They're taking the show on the road in some cases. Conrad's he's so busy running all around. But, man, it's exciting to be here, and I'm grateful for these opportunities. And I love talking old school wrestling with you, Arn. So if you're ready, man, I'm ready to jump in. Let's talk a little August 1987. What do you say?
Sounds good.
All right, let's do it. So listen, last week, speaking of Conrad, you guys went back to July of 1987, and it featured the Great American Bash Tour. And this was the first time fans were introduced to the War Games, the match beyond, where the only way to win was submit or surrender. And as the top act, I mean, you were some damn dirty heels, the Horsemen. You fell victim not only once, Arn, but twice to Dusty, Nikita, the Road Warriors, and Paul Ellering.
Oh, I've fallen victim more than twice. That doesn't get the ball rolling. Yeah, those war games were an incredible concept, and it was, the big thing was it was about durability, because it didn't matter what happened until everyone was in the ring and they made the announcement, okay, the match beyond, then you could have a finish to the match. So it was brutal. You couldn't get out. You couldn't get in. It was just a whole different violent concept.
Well, I wanted to follow up because last week, Arn, when you and Conrad went off the air, the boss man made an executive decision, and he said, hey, over at Ad Free Shows, I want to release War Games 1 and 2. And what we did, Arn, we found that you and Conrad had watched those matches together back in 2020. So we synced your play-by-play, you and Conrad's, to the video of War Games 1 and 2. We synced it all up nice and tight and relaunched those this past week. I did a little intro, a little interlude, and then an ending, and resynced you and Conrad, full video available at Ad Free Shows of both those matches. You can only find that stuff at Ad Free Shows, man. That's an experience of a lifetime for sure.
Nice. Well, it's good that the family got something special. Yeah, and I vaguely remember talking about that, so it's that was a good call. Very nice.
Yep. So we put that together. So check it out. Ad-free shows. You're going to be able to find stuff like that. Who else would you rather hear than the founder of the Four Horsemen and the Podfather together reliving those great memories? So check it out. Adfreeshows.com. There's the cheap plug for the week. But let's get back to it. The tour, the Great American Bash Tour, lots of dates, huge venues, major violence, more blood. And I'd like to tell you that you get to catch your breath here, but Jim Crockett Promotions hits the ground running in August. And as a member of the most important heel stable at the time, you're featured very heavily, my friend.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I carved out a niche for myself, and the Horsemen carved out a niche for all of us, and Jim Crockett Promotions, and business was just on fire.
Well, Arn, let's get into it. We're going to take it back to August 1st. It's you and Tully taking on Westcott and Patterson. Those are two names you don't hear of for a World Championship Wrestling taping. And then later on in the same show, it's the TV champion Tully Blanchard taking on Ricky Morton in singles action. What do you remember about watching Tully and Ricky as these two would work together one-on-one every once in a while?
Well, it's everybody that worked with Ricky. Basically, it was magic. And Tully, being a guy that had a more wide open style, he would have catered to Ricky's style perfectly. I don't think either one of those guys were ever really in a bad match with anybody else.
Two guys that were great in tag team wrestling, but to your point, Arn, two guys that could tear it up as singles wrestlers. Absolutely the case.
100%.
Well, listen, much like most of your career in Jim Crockett, later that same day, you and Tully are wrestling once again, and you're taking on Ricky and Robert for the NWA tag team titles at the Richmond Coliseum with 7,500 in attendance. You're second from the top on this card in a losing effort to the Rock and Roll Express, but this marks the official transition away from working with the Road Warriors every single night. As a ring general, how different was it working with each of these teams in less than 48 hours? And I ask that, Arn, because their styles are on opposite sides of the spectrum when you compare the hard-hitting styles of the Warriors versus the frenetic pace of the Rock and Roll Express.
Well, I can't explain it any better than that, but it's both ends of the spectrum. You know, anytime you go with the Road Warriors, it's like 2-a-day summer camp football practice. You know, it's going to be very high impact. It's going to be very violent. It's rough on the body. Rock and Roll Express, you better have your cardio up because those guys are going to test your cardio. It's not that hard thumping type match, but it's, you better be on your toes. And what I'd like, as we read through these, calendar months and all these shows that we're doing, the opponents we have on these TV tapings, you're not going to recognize the names. It really doesn't matter. In those days, it was about the featured performer. And something to consider when we go from a TV taping in the morning and we suddenly appear during our discussion of the month in another town, that took travel. And it was, travel is something that's a little frustrating sometimes. It's a little taxing. It's a little bit, hard, and it's a little bit difficult. And keeping that in mind, I think it will give our audience a little better sense of Jesus. These guys, unless they had a genie in a bottle, man, they're skipping around here, and there's not even time to eat or take a shower or take your boots off. It's a lot of cases it would go straight from the. Depending on when you were on in the taping, you may have to just throw on a pair of sweats and go straight to the plane and head to another town.
Tony Schiavone here to tell you about the greatest value in the history of our great sport. AdFreeShows.com. Get every episode of What Happened When and all of Conrad's other podcasts early, ad-free, and on video for as low as $9 a month. That's the price of a Starbucks coffee for hundreds of hours of video and audio content each month. That's not all. AdFreeShows.com is home to exclusive bonus content, like interactive events where you get to ask me anything during our Ask Tony live events. And if you're a Top Guy member, we got to hang out for the entire weekend in Chicago at Top Guy Weekend recently. Did I mention there's also happy hour every other Sunday with my dear, good, close personal friend, Rebel? If you call yourself a wrestling fan and haven't signed up for ad-free shows yet, you a lie. Sign up today at adfreeshows.com.
I think you said it perfectly, Arn. Some of us who have a long day worth of travel, we're exhausted from the travel, let alone anything else.
Well, and it is. And those, if it was times that we were on the private planes, great. But if you're on, if you're hard pressed to get to the airport, of course, you're not going to, go to the airport in your wrestling gear, obviously. But there were sometimes late night flights, you would just throw on some sweats over your wrestling boots and show up on an 11 o'clock flight after an evening taping, So there was pretty difficult in those days to get around, but we were on fire and we were drawing and there was a demand and you didn't even think about it then. You just get to the airport.
There was money to be made, absolutely, and you were running hard. And so we're still at the Richmond Coliseum here, and of note, Ronnie Garvin would defeat Ric Flair by DQ in the main event. Garvin would become the new challenger to Flair following the hotel incident where Ronnie dressed in drag pretending to be Precious. What memories do you have of this angle, Arn? That was a fun one as a fan watching.
Well, he's one ugly broad, let me just put it to you that way. I didn't tell him at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's that whole thing was a little creepy, but it was well done. It was a good setup and perfect for Rick with his whole demeanor and his whole gimmick and character, and he played right into that. So it was kind of a cute way to get to a match versus just your traditional, hey, you're the champion, I want to be the champion type deal. Pretty creative stuff. It
was one of the few times back then in Crockett that you saw a little bit of that entertainment side of pro wrestling with Crockett, because mostly you would see stuff like that back in the WWF, but now you're seeing a little bit of that here with this angle, and it was good. It was fun, and I'll never forget that angle. I mean, anytime you see Ronnie Garvin in a wig like that, it's a little scary. I think my brain was scarred as a young boy, but
full makeup.
Yeah, full makeup.
That would help most people. Not in this case.
Not at all. Well, August 2nd, you take on Nikita Koloff in a losing effort. And this one's at the Charlotte Coliseum in front of 8,371 fans. And that night, Tully worked with Barry with the television title and $10,000 on the line. Flair fought Garvin to a no contest. And this one is a little bit, not talking about the wrestling, but I want to talk a little bit about special stipulations. Do you think that the $10,000 caveat added anything to these matches when the championship was already on the line?
It's always good to put some extra bucks in your pocket, for sure. I mean, I think it jazzed it up a bit. I'm not sure how much. It was just a little added incentive, and anyone sitting out in the audience can appreciate how many nice things $10,000 would buy. So, yeah, I think it might have jazzed it up. And something else, Paul, to just kind of keep in the back of your head is as we read through these cards, and it's like one night you're next to last, or you're on last with Dusty, or next to last with Nikita, and then you come back to a town, less than a week later, you're in the second match with somebody else. We had gotten to a point where the Horsemen were established, and we were interchangeable. You could use us in the second match or the first match of the night, or you could use us on last, and it was equally as important to the card. So it was more about the guys that were being featured than the opponents, because there's going to be some of these cards that I kind of scratched my head and went, how did I end up back down there, And
you're going to see that on this card. You're going to see that as we go through August. I mean, I think at one point we're going to touch on a card, you're the dark match.
Well, there you go.
I mean, so to your point.
For a TV taping.
Absolutely.
And that's, that was a advertised match that they knew they were going to get, because the audience would get to a TV taping, and most of those matches were about opponents that didn't have a chance in hell. And it was just the way the business was back then, and it was mostly heel night for television. The heels would go out and thump somebody and grab a microphone and let you know, okay, when we get to Richmond this coming Friday, or we get to Charlotte on Saturday, or whatever the case may be, now we get our matchup between top players.
Well, Arn, I move on to August 3rd, and this is an interesting night because the Horsemen are featured at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium. Tully defeats Nikita, retaining his TV title and the $10,000, might I add. Lex takes on Barry, and he retains the U.S. title. Ric Flair defeats Ronnie. You, sir, are conspicuous by your absence and did not have a match on this card. Now, I'm curious, would you have traveled on a night with so much of the Horsemen on the show? Would you have traveled on a night that you weren't on the card? Would you still kind of be there in the back?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Some very few times would I ever be there and not have a match. Is it possible that I might have ran in on one of these matches?
It's possible, but you definitely didn't have a match on the card. But sure, they, when they give the results and what we pull from, doesn't say a run-in unless it affected the end of the match, and it doesn't say that. So, not sure where Arn was that night on August 3rd.
Well, I would like to think I had a day off, but I kind of doubt it. I bet I was roaming around back there somewhere and just didn't work that night.
There you go. Well, August 4th, you're back because it's a worldwide taping, and it would air on August 15th. You pin Brodie Chase following the Spine Buster, and at the same taping, you and Tully defeat John Savage and Mike Force. That match would air on August the 8th of 87, but of special note, and this is a big one, the following television taping, you and Tully took on the Rock and Roll Express. The live crowd paid to see this match, but it was not aired on TV. When wrestling rock and roll, were there any specific things you did differently during the dark matches as opposed to the TV or even pay-per-view matches?
No, it would just be a house show match. And it would be longer, obviously, because there were no television time constraints. It was the same physical match that you would have if it was the main event and anywhere else in a live event.
How common was it for, and you were just mentioning this, that we could have been placed anywhere on the card, but how common was it for Crockett to use top-tier acts like you and rock and roll in dark matches for live crowds?
It was very common because that was the advertised. They called it the advertised dark match. And so if you were going to buy a ticket to that show, and Jimmy was very smart, promoters of that era were very smart. When you advertised a match, there would be a large percentage of that crowd that would pay specifically to see that match. So you gave it to them. And it was at the end of the night, and it was also a little trickery to keep the crowd there the entire night, because when you're taping more than one show, say you're taping a couple of shows, and there's a lot of mismatches on those shows, the crowd can get a little restless. But if they knew they had that main event match at the end of the night, that's what kept them.
Well, Arn, we move on to August 5th, another TV taping. This time at the TBS studios, you and Tully defeated Larry Stevens and Rocky King, and then move on to August 8th, a worldwide taping that we just mentioned, and it featured a match with you and Nikita. I want to check out a little bit of this match.
Was a good elbow that time by Nikita.
He shouldn't let Arn take that much of a breath, though.
Hey, come on, Nikita.
Arn, you end up on the losing end of the match against Nikita as he pins you with a roll-up at the 16-minute mark with a little help from Ricky Morton. I want to pause right there, Arn, and say it again. A 16-minute match with Nikita Koloff on television. That's a lot of trust from Crockett and you to put that kind of shine on Nikita, considering it's TV time, is it not?
I had a pretty healthy sweat going there.
You did.
Some of these TV arenas, man, they were hot. Spartanburg was really a hot place, and some of these smaller venues, and it was summertime, was it not? And you can tell. So, yeah, I mean, at that point, I was pretty much established. I think in the company's eyes, they could put me in any situation and no problem.
It's just interesting, too, of all opponents, Nikita going 16 minutes, which most would say had a limited offensive repertoire. But Arn, you brought it out of him and went 16 minutes. And, of course, they got to have the tie in there with Ricky Morton because this month there's a lot of Rock and Roll Express and Arn and Tully thread throughout this. So there we go. So that's how that one ended. The main event of this show featured Dusty and Luger when Luger is inadvertently backdropped over the top. The ref sees it, and then I want you to check out what happens with this clip, Arn, as we continue to build this story through August.
Stay with the back. Over the top. Lex went over the top. Above me. Went down. Dusty hooks him over. Has him down for the pin. 1, 2, 3. Dusty's got him. United States Heavyweight Champion Dusty Rhodes. Barry Windham, the Rock and Roll Express, Nikita Koloff. All in there to congratulate Dusty. They give the belt to Lex, and Lex is gone. Lex is gone. We gotta take a break, I think. But Lex is gone. He's reversed the decision. He's reversed the decision. Lex Luger's the champion. Why'd he do that? Run him back. Don't go away. Why'd he do that, Tom? Let's check on it. Dusty is on his way to the dressing room, David. I think we just lost it. We lost him. Dusty's on his way. There, he's in the dressing room now. He's right in there.
It's over. It's over, Dream. He's had enough. Let him up. Dream. It's over. It ain't over. It ain't over. You getting ready. It ain't over. Got that right, brother.
Wow. So there we have it. I mean, a few observations. First of all, it was the flipping Luger over the back, over the ropes that caused the disqualification. You have kind of that Dusty finish schmaz. I miss it when all the good guys run out to celebrate when the guy wins the championship. You know, that was always fun back in those days.
Well, it made it big.
It did.
And it was clear that one of the rules, albeit there were just very few rules, but one of them is if you backdropped or you threw a guy over the top rope or anything intentionally, that was a disqualification.
And that's what happened. It appeared Dusty won, only to have the decision reversed. Windham and Rock and Roll came out to do the big celebration. The Dream would attack Luger in the back. So for those that weren't able to see the video on ad-free shows, Dream chased down Luger to the locker room, put him in the sleeper hold. Dylan, JJ, was yelling at Dusty, it's over, Dream. And Dusty said, it ain't over. Get him ready. He spat down on Luger and walked away. Man, it's only months into his career at this point, but Luger is taking Dusty on one-on-one matches. Was there a lot of confidence in Dusty's ability to help make Luger? It certainly looks like it.
Yeah, I mean, he just had such tremendous star power, but that was just another way that you weren't having to have a 4-star match. For Dusty to bust into Luger's locker room and choke him out, it's pretty ballsy. But that's what made baby faces in those days. The audience had to believe in you. They had to believe that if you said something, you were going to do it, and then if you got screwed, you were going to handle it. And Dusty was one of those guys that they believed in, 100%.
Well, Arn, after the TV taping, you guys are in Pittsburgh. You're second from the top. You and Tully lose to the Rock and Roll Express. And then we move on to August 9th for a matinee show where you take on Barry Windham in a losing effort for the Western States title. You talked a little bit last week about taking on Barry Windham. In these days, what was it like working with Barry one-on-one?
Well, Barry was just, and we talked about also the Western States Heritage Championship meaning nothing. It was a make-believe championship that was a mistake that the company made. It just didn't mean anything. It had no background. You couldn't say, well, so-and-so was the former. It was just one of those. And Barry Windham was the last guy on earth that needed a prop. 6'6", 6'7", whatever he is, 250, moved like a gazelle. I mean, he got around that ring like Brad Armstrong, smooth and silk, but he was strong enough to pick up anybody, Road Warriors included. Suplex those guys around, bounce them around. Barry was just so gifted, and anybody from that era that wrestled Barry, you ask them, what did you think about wrestling Barry Windham? They're going to tell you the same, 100%. And if they don't, they're full of crap. He was as talented as anybody has ever been in this business, period.
Do you ever get to talk to Barry anymore or see him much?
At some of these Comic-Cons that we go to, and, I get to see Barry and just spend a few minutes talking to him, but we're usually pretty busy. We get there about 15 minutes before the signing starts, and be honest with you, we sign until it's time to leave, whether that be 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is. So I haven't had a chance to spend as much time with him as I would like to, but I get to see him occasionally.
He seems like a very quiet and reserved guy. Is that the case?
He really is. He really is. And, those of us that are still around that have got a lot of years of travel, under our belt and pretty beat up, some substantial injuries, and we've all got them. It's those days of skipping around the room like your butt's on fire are over. We're all kind of reserved and quiet and just want to relax.
Been through a lot of wear and tear over the years.
Boy, howdy. That's the reason I love like what we're doing today, Paul.
Absolutely.
We get to communicate with our audience and let them know that what they were seeing, kind of more the in-depth of what they were seeing and help them understand it. Go, oh, God, I remember that. So this is a great venue. I'm much appreciative to you being a fan and us going back and helping the audience remember the golden years.
The glory days. There you go.
Buddy. Yeah, buddy.
All right. Well, so that's August 9th. That's the matinee, you and Barry. Later that night, because that's just how you guys rolled, you're at the Omni. There's 14,000 in attendance, and you and Tully would fall short against the Rock and Roll Express for the NWA tag titles. The other Horsemen were also in action as Dusty defeated Luger by disqualification, and Flair successfully defended his title against Ron Garvin in a match that also ended in DQ. And then the next day, and this is also a time period, I'm sure you and Connor have talked about it a little bit, but this is the intermingling time period of Jim Crockett and the UWF. So on August 10th, there was a UWF show in Stockton, California. Robert Gibson and Sting, who was subbing in for Ricky Morton, defeated you and Tully in front of 1,500 people. So the night before, you're in front of 14,000, and then fly all the way to the West Coast to wrestle in front of only 1,500. Was this a market issue, card issue, promotion issue, wrestler issue, or is this just the way it was?
Well, we weren't established out there. We weren't, that was a place we were just sticking our finger into. And I would imagine there wasn't enough time spent on promotion. The card might have been, in the old days you can make a lot of excuses, but, when you really cut through the BS, maybe they didn't want to see it. There's 1,000 different reasons, but it's kind of embarrassing looking back on it, 1,500 people. And that's definitely a long way to get from Atlanta to Stockton.
Long ways away, but you guys were so entrenched in the South and in the Southeast and even in the Northeast a little bit. When you think of Baltimore, Philadelphia, going out West, I'm sure was still, still getting used to that marketplace. But this is also the first time I want to talk about this. This has got to be one of the first times you work with Sting. Do you remember having an initial impression of the Stinger?
Green, but he had something. He just had that. He had that fire and that pep in his step, and he bounced around that ring, and he looked like $1 million. He just had a very unique look, and he was just energized. He was Green in the fact that he didn't know how to put all the pieces together of who he was and what the character was yet, but you knew that he had something, and there was something on the horizon that was going to be very interesting.
Well, Arn, on August 11th, Jim Crockett taped an episode of Worldwide. It would air on August 22nd of 87. The event was recorded in Columbia, South Carolina, another hot venue for you guys. Flair cost the Garvin brothers a match against the Midnight Express where the U.S. tag titles were on the line. Later in the show, Dusty would shoot a promo where he endorsed Ronnie Garvin and his goal to take the world title from Ric Flair. Again, you got to think he's just adding even more credibility to Ron Garvin and his fight against Ric Flair to ultimately win that world title. So we saw a little bit of that. Barry Windham still coming after you. He challenges you to a title match. So there are multiple moving parts here. You're feuding with Rock and Roll. You're feuding with Barry. But Dusty, he always seems to be somewhere on the periphery, as he should be. He's a main player here. But you're kind of going in two different directions, but all at the same time seems to be working, right? You got your feud with Rock and Roll and feud with Barry going on.
We had a feud with everybody. You could have put George South against Tully Blanchard, and you would have just went, okay, I'm interested in seeing that. The pieces were interchangeable, and if you again go back and when you're thinking through how difficult some of this stuff was, we went, from East Coast, Atlanta, Georgia, to Stockton.
Yeah.
And then all the way back
Columbia.
for TV taping in Columbia. That's a bunch of travel, buddy. In 5.5 hours at 35,000 feet, wrecks your body pretty good.
Well, we move on from August 11th, and later that night, under the UWF banner, it's you and Tully and Luger. You're representing the Horsemen, and you're taking on another UWF guy. It's Steve Dr. Death Williams, the UWF champion in the Rock and Roll Express, in a losing effort. Only 1,800 fans were in attendance for this one, and this emanated out of San Jose. But I want to hear your impressions of Dr. Death.
Well, it's there's a history there. We started at the exact same time. He came out of college and was brought it in. Bill Watts brought him in, and he was going to be his superstar. Doc was 330 pounds at that time. He played football. He wrestled. He was just a beast. And I was just starting in the business, and I was opening match in Bill Watts territory, Mid-South. And so Doc and I were on a lot of cards. We were just positioned differently. He was just coming in, going to be a megastar at that time, and this was my 82 probably for me. And I was just, trying to break in the business and just get a job and just, learn the business. So we had a history, together. And meeting this time, we're positioned a little differently, and I'm a lot more qualified to go out and feature Doc.
Seeing Doc in the ring, you got to think a guy like him, the sky's the limit for someone with his ability and athleticism and size. He was just impressive in the ring, wasn't he, Arn?
He was very rare commodity. He had everything. And, he was athletic and he moved around that ring. I mean, during those days when we would work with Doc, he would press me like for a press slam, but he would press me a dozen times before he press slammed me. He was just, and I was no tiny guy at that time. I was 250 pounds. He just did some really feats of strength that were just ridiculous.
Well, you would move on August 12th. Jim Crockett would hold TV tapings at the Great Western Forum in Inglewood, California. That's right, where the Showtime Lakers made their home in the 80s. And you wrestled your longtime friend, Brad Armstrong, that night at the Great Western Forum. That's a story in of itself right there that you can tell your children and grandchildren.
I'm sure if I could go back and watch that, if I could relive it, it was as good as it gets. Not only Brad was a close friend, and Bob was, his dad was responsible for getting my first break. Brad was, you're talking about smooth. He was like a combination of Barry Windham and Ricky Steamboat and Ricky Morton, if that's possible. He was just so gifted.
You got to make two amazing wrestlers, two classy guys, one-on-one in one of the most known venues of all time, the Great Western Forum. It doesn't get any better than that. And I put in my notes, who won? Some may ask. The fans won that night. That's who won that match.
Well
so there
said.
you go.
Well said. And I can guarantee you Brad Armstrong looked like a 4-star. I mean, blue chip.
Yeah.
This guy's going to be a star.
So cool. It is cool to go back though, Arn, because I'm sure, you've been up and down the road, the miles, the air miles, everything. That sometimes those little line items of where you are and who you wrestled, to have those brought back and put in front of you again, it's like, wait, I did that on that date? Wow, that's really cool. And to me, that's one that popped off the page when I was researching those notes. So, what a career.
Very perceptive, Paul. And when you're in there slugging it out with Dr. Death on one night, or Nikita, or the Road Warriors, guys that are very physical, and then you get a guy like Brad Armstrong in Los Angeles, and you've got movie stars sitting ringside, and you got movie stars in the back wanting to meet you, and all those things and all that glitz and glamour, and then get to go to the ring and for 15 minutes, and I'm sure I took close to that. I'm sure I was very selfish, and get to just go out and just burn it down with Brad Armstrong. You're right. It's what I tell you what, it filled those gaps. And when you were traveling and you had ice pack on your elbow and one on your knee or one on your lower back, those are the things that kept the business fun, and knowing that you did the right thing, and it eased the pain. It was better than any painkiller. Just to come back through the curtain after being out there with a guy like Brad and just going, God, was that fun.
Well, August 14th, we had to move on. You moved to the Norfolk Scope. And once again, second from the top, it's you and Tully in a losing effort to the Rock and Roll Express. You move over to the 15th. You defeated Brodie Chase with the Spine Buster in a squash match. It's a worldwide taping. And, buddy, we need to take a look at that Spine Buster. And Tony Schiavone is on the call. Here we go.
Sword Buster together. Two of the most awesome moves in wrestling. You put that up there with Ric Flair's figure 4, Tully slingshot, Lex Luger and his backbreaker, Nikita sickle, Dusty Rhodes and his elbow, and now Dusty Rhodes in that sleeper hold. That's so effective. What a move that was. Arn just smiling to the fans, knowing he's in complete command of the match. Telling tries to get up, but he can't. He really cannot. Helps him up, slaps him in the face again. Brodie Chase, second time, dropped it. Reversal by Anderson, ducks down. Here it is. Spine buster. And good night, Brodie Chase. As awesome as ever. Arn Anderson. Watch this spine buster.
A snap.
Not as smooth as some of them,
The
but
Horsemen
effective.
and Arn
I'll blame
Anderson
Brodie
still
Chase
alone.
on that.
We'll talk to Ron Garvin. We'll talk to Jim Cornette. And
Brodie had a
Midnight
pretty good
Express.
punch
Thank
there
you.
at the end. Drop kick, not so much.
He's not around to defend himself, so we'll blame Brodie. But, man, you snapped that. And listen, Tony Schiavone said it. My God, the man's still calling wrestling. He said, good night, Brodie Chase. As awesome as ever, Arn Anderson. That was the line right there. Buddy,
Tony-
you had it working, man.
Well, thanks, Paul. And, you know, the thing about it is Tony just called the action. He wasn't, you know, nobody ever thought, well, why is he putting the bad guys over so strong? He just called it like he saw it, and that's what made him, you know, so good. He was just straddling the line and calling the action.
And that's what I love. I like it like Jim Ross always says, you don't know what's going to happen, and you call it like a sport. You call it like you see it, and that's what makes it feel real. And you're not talking about what the next event or what's happening. No, tell me what you're seeing in the ring and paint a picture. I want to feel the intensity. And you're exactly right. That was it's a lot of fun, and it elevates what's happening in the ring. So very cool to see.
And some companies do that, and some don't. And
You got it.
The ones that do, if you go back in the day, it reeled you in and made you part of it and made you feel it, and that was great.
You know what? The other thing I noticed watching that, Arn, my goodness, I can't help it, but I see a lot of Brock in that young Arn Anderson in that ring there. Some of the facials, the body movements, I can't help but see your son now as I watched him wrestle, and some of the same movements, some of the same facials as his daddy. So it's just cool to see.
Well, in the training that he's had, you know, so far, you know, and us going over to the ring, and you know, at his first coach, Lodi, you know, nowhere on any of those workouts over the past year or so did I ever say, hey, do this, do it like that, and have this demeanor, and have, you know, turn this way. It's just things that, you're right, he just picks up these mannerisms and movements, and I can't even see it myself. And it's nothing that you want to coach, or I'm trying to coach. It's just something, I guess the apple, you know, doesn't fall very far from the tree is a true statement sometimes. And I'm so proud of him, Paul.
You should be.
He's so respectful of the business, and, you know, I wouldn't have had it any other way. You know, he was taught to respect the business and everybody that was in the business before him, because they had paved the way for, you know, all of us. You know, you have to respect these guys, and he's coming along really well, and he's fitting in with the company, AEW, and I just couldn't be prouder of him.
That's great. You can definitely see it. I think he spent a lot more time watching tapes and you know, network of his dad than his dad may even know, just by watching some of his mannerisms now.
Well, as more of the story unfolds, he was watching for a long time everybody and everything before I ever knew about it.
There you go. Well, Arn, on August 16th, as we keep the storyline going here for August of '87, it's Chicago, the UIC Pavilion. 8,700 fans in a sellout, and they saw the Horsemen lose a War Games match to Dusty, Nikita, Ron Garvin, and the Road Warriors. Interestingly, despite the injury, it's reported that JJ was in this match. Do you have any memories of this third match? I imagine the crowd in Chicago had to be hot for this.
JJ was in this match.
That's what was reported, even though they said the last one he would never wrestle again, but that's what the sites out there have, that he was in this one in Chicago.
If he got in, I would say that
I didn't do much.
He didn't do anything, I would imagine, which we would have figured out. I have no recollection of that whatsoever, but I know that he wasn't, from the time he popped his shoulder out, he was never able to do anything again physical like that. So if he did get in, somebody else got beat. As soon as JJ got in the ring, we must have had a finish pretty quickly, but I just don't remember. I wish I did.
That's okay. Well, listen, the next day it's Denver, Colorado, and this one is a UWF TV taping. We're bouncing back and forth here. Tully, and Luger took on the Road Warriors and Nikita in a 6-man tag. Flair defeats Dusty by DQ in the main event. Now, this is a stacked TV taping. Do you think this was because UWF live events were starting to fall short? Are they just going to say, hey, we're going to throw everything we can when we're doing these UWF TV tapings?
Well, business was down. I mean, when Jimmy bought the company, they were not on fire. They were going through a down period. So that's what you bought, was a product that was not on fire. And we were throwing everything we could get. You would never give those matches away normally. But, you were trying to put butts in seats. And when we acquired them, they became part of our company. We're all one company now. So, you couldn't go back to the East Coast 100% of the time and go to our bread and butter. You had to experience some of these markets where their television aired, or what had you bought, because Jimmy had purchased the company, and that was the TV times and the TV slots and all that included. You had to utilize it.
Well, we're back to a Jim Crockett Promotions taping on August 19th. It's also, not only is it a worldwide, but it's an NWA Pro at the Cumberland County Civic Center in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You have a featured spot on this taping as Tony Schiavone examined the attempt by the Horsemen, you and Tully, to defeat the Rock and Roll Express for the tag titles. Barry would also do a ringside interview saying he would accept your challenge any place, anytime for the Western States Heritage title. And on NWA Super Bouts, this was also taped the same day, you interfered in a match between Tully and Nikita. And I want to take a look at this one. Let's check it out.
Out of a situation, but it appears like he's going to be doomed, and there's no way out. Blanchard will always come up with a way, unless, of course, like a little earlier, he gets some help from Dillon outside the ring. Now, Nikita dragging him back to the ring. Blanchard trying to get out again.
Oh, they got to be late in this 25-minute time limit match, and someone's going to have it real quick for Nikita Koloff. He has really put out a great match. Up in the air. He scoops Tully. Down goes for the mat.
Blanchard again near the ropes, though, and Dillon has got him out of hand.
Dillon trying to pull him out. Nikita trying to pull him in.
There goes Dillon into the ring.
He pulled them both in the ring. Holy cow.
Nikita slams them both together. Dillon goes through the ropes. Down goes the referee. Nikita has
Holy
Blanchard
shit.
into the air.
That bumped Tommy Young to it.
Them refs were getting beat up, man. Here you come. What are you doing, Arn?
Nothing.
Chicanery.
It's not a thing.
Tully was something on his
Anderson
own.
came charging down and gave him.
Why do you
some
ask?
type of an object.
Yeah,
And
you gave him a
Blanchard's got it
handful of
outside.
something or other.
Nikita got hit.
There's Arn shoving
Here comes
the referee
Hebner.
back into the ring now.
Oh, it was Hebner that took
Yeah.
the bump, not Tommy Young. I was going to say, that's a hell of a bump for Tommy.
We got pandemonium.
Barry, that stooge.
Now these two wrestle, and like Barry's throwing, but there's no disqualification on Barry here, which is interesting.
The match has to be over, right?
No,
It's still going?
yes. This is just now Nikita whacks him.
Well, the idea, I guess, is that those guys weren't in the match, right?
I mean, I guess
The match was Nikita and Tully.
it was Nikita and Tully.
Was there any physicality between
The disqualification should have been when Barry Windham and Tully started slugging each other right in front of the ref's face. Everything else was behind the ref's back.
Well, but they weren't in the match, right?
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, you can't DQ a match with two guys that aren't in the match or fighting just each other.
Wouldn't they DQ it, though, because Barry shouldn't have been doing anything in the match or swinging back? Here, we'll talk about this as soon as this goes off there. So Nikita wins. All right, Nikita wins. So wouldn't they have to disqualify Tully, though, because him and Barry started swinging each other?
Well, yeah. If Barry got to Tully, that should have been a DQ right there.
Yeah.
You're right. I was half-ass paying attention.
That's okay. It was just, so here we go. Just to wrap it up for those that didn't get to watch it with us. Tully hits Nikita with a foreign object. Barry stopped the ref from making the count. Nikita would win by hitting Tully with the same foreign object after taking it from J.J. Dillon with the Russian sickle. With the win, Nikita becomes the new television champion. This is big news here. Rock and Roll, Barry Windham, and Ron Garvin, among the other faces, come to the ring and celebrate with Nikita. And there we go. Now, before we move on, I have to ask you, Arn, how good was Tully as a TV champion in your estimation? I have him as 1B, behind you, of course. But how good was Tully Blanchard as a TV champion?
1B. That was a big, doubling back a little bit. That was exciting, and it was a big win for Nikita. That TV
Huge.
title meant something because Tully had made it, mean something. So that was a good win. It was a big win for him. The crowd popped huge. You're right. There were some idiosyncrasies as far as what should have been a DQ, but we got away with some stuff by putting so much excitement around it that the audience really didn't question it that much, and I think that's the case of what happened here, maybe.
That's okay, and you know what? It's history. That's wrestling history. Nikita's your television champion on this same exact day. So we just saw all that pandemonium that broke loose, all the craziness, the wildness, going to commercial break, the crowds going crazy. This same day at that same taping, these fans were in for a treat because unfortunately for George South, he fell victim to a pissed-off enforcer, and you hit him both with the spine buster and gourd buster. Bob Cottle interviewed you and Lex about the feuds with Dusty and Rock and Roll following the match. Let's check it out.
And now we have two of the four horsemen, Arn Anderson, Lex Luger, and J.J. Dillon.
David Crockett, we have a little turmoil in the camp of the four horsemen because Tully Blanchard has fallen as the world television champion, and believe me, he's been the greatest champion of all time. And for him to lose the title in this way, where Nikita Koloff would stoop to using a foreign object, and then worse, to have the referee and everybody else let him get by with it. Obviously, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson are going to move on to bigger and better things. Arn Anderson has sights on the Western States Heritage title held by Barry Windham. And yes, he and Arn Anderson destined to be the next world tag team champions. Right, Arn?
What the bottom line is, Barry Windham, you set yourself up as the fall guy. You thought you did the right thing by helping Nikita steal Tully's world television title. All you did was get on the hit list. Rock and Roll Express, look in these eyes when I tell you your next world tag team champions are myself and Tully Blanchard. Believe it, because the Horsemen said it.
And there's this whole thing about the Weaver lock. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Chokehold.
What we're talking about right here is the four horsemen are in the business of collecting titles, not losing them. That was a small step that they took. It was blatant interference with a foreign object. Tully Blanchard has been a fine champion, and he will be a fine world tag team champion with this man right here, Double A, the enforcer, Arn Anderson. And when we're talking about Dusty Rhodes, I've already destroyed half of the superpowers, the myth, that era of invincibility. When I beat Nikita Koloff for the U.S. heavyweight title. And now the Total Package has his sights set on the American Dream himself. Three-time world champion, resorting to extracurricular work with Johnny Weaver. Johnny Weaver, my words to you are stick to your unbiased announcing. That's what you do best. Don't just stick your nose in the Four Horsemen's business. Number two, Dusty Rhodes, as we grew up on the opposite sides of the track. I grew up in a class, culture, environment. I've always had the good things in life. You are the son of a plumber. You grew up on the other side. You've had to fight and scratch for everything you've had. I fight to maintain what I've always had, the best things in life. And that's why I'll be the U.S. heavyweight champion for as long as I see fit to remain the U.S. heavyweight champion. Sleep on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with more action.
And there we go. You guys breaking it down like it is. Man, Lex even getting a lot of mic work there.
You know, it's funny. We go back and look at stuff. That wasn't one of our better outings as far as a promo. Lex had a good game plan with what he wanted to say. He was just rushing it a little bit, jamming it on top of each other, other than letting you hear every word and every statement sink in. Wasn't happy with what I had to say at that particular point, but, you know, every day can't be a grand slam. And it's good that we can go back and look at this stuff and look at the mistakes that we made and the content and, you know, the verbiage or whatever it may be. But I think you got the point across, and things are heating up.
Well, this is a wild day on television, Arn. We're not done yet because you and the Rock and Roll Express are just getting started, and I'm going to show you why right here in this next clip.
It's just like a snowball effect, David Crockett. We thrive over adversity. We're forgetting about the world television title. Maybe it was a godsend. Now we can concentrate on what we want, being the world tag team titles. And when I tell you it's going to happen, the fire still burns in these eyes. It will happen.
We're going to let it roll, and there's a reason why, Arn. Watch this. Does Tully still wear those blue shorts to AEW, by the way?
He better never wear those ever again. The bellman at the Marriott beat him up if he wore those shorts.
So you two attack the Rock and Rolls before their match starts. They would go ahead and fight these guys, but we'd move ahead in this match because you and Tully are not done. Damn, what a scary man.
Ricky down. That chair came in, David, but it was a little bit too late right there. Now watch this. Watch what's happened. Caught by surprise. Out of nowhere, they came back again, and you know Tully was upset, and so was Arn because of what had happened. Robert down. Finally got up. And the cord buster.
Man, I love. I have to keep. I'm the one who edits the video, and I have to keep the video just so I can hear the classic music at the end too. So many wonderful memories.
I guess the moral of that story is persistence, right?
Hey, it's red hot. You two are back in the ring again. That beat down on the Rock and Roll Express, the double gore buster, where Tully helps you with it. I like that.
Absolutely. If you fail the first time, nobody said we couldn't come back and try again later.
And try again later you would, but in a different way, because everybody came back to the ring to close out this show. The entire group's together. Ladies and gentlemen, the Horsemen.
All right, with us again, the four horsemen. Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson,
all over the show.
J.J. Dillon.
Wow,
hey guys,
what a loaded
you jumped
show.
him from behind. I'm talking about, that's right. You do need your glasses changed. We're talking about the World Tag Team Champions, Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express.
No, what they had to be taught was a little bit of a lesson. You get into a verbal joust out here. First of all, you cut off our interview time. The rock and roll music comes up. That was a slap in the face. Somebody needed to pay for it. They just had to be the wrong place. All right, champ, right here. All right, baby. Right here, champ. What we're trying to tell you is plain and simple. It's a snowball effect. It's a cumulative effect. What I'm telling you, Tully Blanchard and myself are going to start taking. We're tired of sacrificing each other for the common cause. We're going to take some for us. What we showed you a little earlier, Morton and Gibson, was a visual aid. It's just one little thing to remind you we're constantly together. Right here. Yeah.
We'll see you on the best Worldwide Wrestling.
So there you go. All of you out to close the show. What do you think? Is it just making a statement having the Horsemen all together? It feels powerful. It feels like there's no better way to close the show than to have Flair there with the robe, Lex there with the U.S. title, the two of you, JJ. Man, it's just all of you together was a powerful way to close the show.
Unity. With Flair not saying anything, it just was stronger, I thought. Just meant it was out there. It was solidarity. It was we were one group and all for one, one for all. And this ain't a Three Musketeers commercial.
It is. It's the use of all five of you, and if you include JJ in that number, really being there to help put over the baby faces and really building that story arc. And I think you're absolutely right. So we move on. We're finally out of that television show, but what a red hot show that was, man.
Wow.
And it's August 20th. It's Cincinnati, 2,500 fans. Rock and Roll defeat you and Tully when Morton pins Blanchard. The next day, you move on to Charleston, West Virginia with an attendance of 3,500. You and Tully headlined the show against Rock and Roll. You and the Rock and Roll Express all over the place throughout this month. But the next time we would see you would be August 23rd in Minneapolis at the Met Center. 2,500 in attendance, and the main event was Dusty, Nikita, and the Road Warriors defeating the Four Horsemen with you taking a pinfall from Animal. Did you think there's any reason that this event featuring this main event drew 2,500? Could it be, hey, this is Vern Gagne's area of the country?
That meant something back then. It was like when you went to Bill Watts' territory and all they had ever known was the UWF product. This was AWA country. And it was, the fans were loyal. They didn't watch other wrestling. They grew up on AWA and the Gagnes, and that's what they were used to. We were just the other guys coming in, and we hadn't got established in those markets yet, and it was a very real thing.
Well, Arn, this is a big date in August. It's the 24th. It's Greenville, South Carolina. You and Tully defeat Barry Windham and Jimmy Garvin, and the stipulation is the winners of the match become the #1 contenders for the NWA Tag Team title. So it's official. You and Tully are now the #1 contenders to the titles. You move on to Rock Hill, South Carolina on the 25th. It's a Crockett tape television. While you're not on the show, the Road Warriors lost to your comrades, Tully and Luger. The Road Warriors didn't lose often, especially not on television. Would this have to be negotiated? How important was it for the credibility of the Horsemen to be able to beat the Road Warriors on occasion?
You want to say that again?
Yeah, so the Road Warriors lose. Is that
To
something?
who?
To the Horsemen, to Tully and Luger.
The Road Warriors.
The Road Warriors, yes.
Wow. That was unheard of. Unheard of. And it was very rare. And you could probably count the number of times during this area the Road Warriors lost to anybody in one hand, I would think. So it was huge. That's something you could hang your hat on. You could brag about for a year to come.
I can't imagine, what it would be like to tell the Road Warriors, hey, they're gonna go over on you tonight. They're gonna pin your shoulders to the mat. What was those conversations like?
I don't know. Somebody else must have told them. It wasn't me. That's a job for somebody on a little higher pay scale.
That's right. That's not Arn Anderson's job.
No.
But so we're here, and at the same event during this taping for NWA Pro, which would air ultimately the September 5th of '87. I want to talk about this. You defeat Barry Windham by countout with Tully's help when he hit Barry with a steel chair while Tommy Young was down. Of course, you and JJ celebrate your victory by holding up the prestigious Western States title and celebrating with it, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, until Barry jumps back in and cleans house. But Arn, that video doesn't exist anywhere. I went through YouTube, Daily Motion, Google, Bing, the end of the internet. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I just saw some people posting match lineups, and after that match on all the cards, in parentheses behind you and Barry's match, it always says, awesome match. And it's written in all caps. But they did air a 30-second highlight package that opened up worldwide on September 5th, 1987. And I have the clip I want to play, but that match I cannot find, that NWA Pro from September 5th anywhere, but everybody says it's an incredible match. But let's watch the little highlight clip here.
Double here. Now let's break it up, play this time. Step back.
There it is. That's it. That's all that we got from that match ever.
The mystery missing match.
If anybody can find it listening to this show and wants to share it with us, send us a link, whatever the case may be, I'd love to watch that match, but that's the one that I can't find, the mystery match of Arn Anderson and Barry Windham, but you just got 15 seconds of it. So.
Over the prestigious Western States Heritage Championship.
Prestigious, that's correct.
Prestigious, okay.
The Horsemen would have an interview with David Crockett. Flair, per his usual, put over the baby faces and the threat they posed while still making the contingent look unbeatable. Later, Barry would be interviewed by Bob Caudle, and they would review how you never really beat him for the title. In a match for the same taping, you and Tully defeated the Italian Stallion and Denny Brown in just under 5 minutes. After the match, you cut a promo telling Barry how you could beat him on any given night. And in typical heel fashion, Arn, you let him know you and Tully are focused on winning the NWA tag titles from the Rock and Roll Express. This is our last clip of this week. Check it out.
Two of the four horsemen, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson.
You know, David Crockett and all the people sitting out there, Jimmy Garvin, Barry Windham, come out here a little while ago and talk about the Horsemen being torn with from in. Well, I got news for you. If that was being torn up from within, the Horsemen would be doing more of it each and every day because we're on a mission. Nikita Koloff stole the World Television Championship, and it's not going to be left What's the word I'm looking for, Double A? What you're trying to say, Tully, is we thrive on adversity. The bottom line is, Barry Windham, I didn't know if you were as good as they said you were, so I tried you on for size, and yes, you're as good as they say you are. You deserve to be champion, but the bottom line is I got my paw in the air, which tells me on any given night I can beat you, Windham. I'm good enough. I'm man enough to beat you on any given night, and we're going to try it again. What we're trying to tell you, the four horsemen thrive on your strength foes, on yours Koloff, on yours Windham, on yours Garvin's, on yours rock and roll. We're as good as we have to be to stay neck and neck with you. That's what's called thriving on adversity. When the Horsemen say something, you take it to the bank because we don't come out here and make idle threats. Tully Blanchard and myself told you we're putting everything else aside. We're going to concentrate on the Rock and Roll Express World Tag Team titles. When you look in these eyes, you see a fire that burnt for 7 years in the name of Anderson. It's synonymous with World Tag Team Champions. Tully Blanchard and myself are family. We're Horsemen, and we're your next World Tag Team Champions. Right there, baby.
Buddy, what you may have missed in an earlier promo, you made up for and then some with that fire. That's intensity.
Much better. Thank you.
Whew.
I agree.
That's the way you close a show, with a promo like that. So let's put a bow on this one, because we're not going to do much better than what you just did right there. It's August 30th at the Charlotte Coliseum in front of 10,200 people. During an afternoon show, you and Tully wrestled each member of the Rock and Roll Express in singles action. Arn, you and Robert Gibson wrestled to a time limit draw. Tully defeated Ricky Morton. What did you think about these being individual matches instead of tag matches? Was this a welcome change, something different?
I think it was a better fit to always be in a tag with those guys. They were just better together than they were individually, and that's not a knock on those guys, for sure. But it was something different. It was a different challenge, and it was equally as rewarding because they were both very, very talented, and the audience, the thing that you can't get away from is they just loved them.
Mm. Well, Arn, you certainly put on a clinic, I'm sure, with the Rock and Roll Express in singles action, just as you did in tag action. Later that evening, you're back at the Omni in Atlanta, 9,000. So you had 10,000 in Charlotte, 9,000 that evening at the Omni in Atlanta. The NWA six-man tag titles were on the line. It's Dusty and the Road Warriors. They defeated you and Tully and Luger at the 11-minute mark. You've told us before about the pop that these three opponents would draw in places such as Philly and Chicago. We've known from the past episodes the Omni crowd loved Dusty. Did the fans at the Omni react the same way to the Road Warriors? Was it just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta was it was no different than being in Greensboro or Charlotte or any of our main towns. You know, when you wrestled the Road Warriors and that music hit, cold chills. Iron Man, and it was the perfect fit.
That's right.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, so what are you waiting for? Hurry to SaveWithConrad.com.
Iron Man, little Black Sabbath playing, them coming down to the ringside, and intensity all over. Well, Arn, what a wild ride August of '87 has proven to be. You're going back and forth with Barry. You're going back and forth with the Rock and Roll Express. You're focused on those NWA Tag Team Championships. Man, I've enjoyed going down memory lane with you today, buddy.
Me too, my friend. Look forward to our next show, which I think includes you as well, does it not?
I'll be back, fortunately or unfortunately, but I will be back. I'm excited about it, and we're getting close, man. I smell a tag team title run coming for the Horsemen here soon. We're getting there, but we're going to be doing September 1987, and I'm looking forward to that one. But in the meantime, Arn, why don't you tell everybody where they can come out and see you? WrestleCon's coming. It's coming around the corner, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's going to be, and it's going to be huge, and I really look forward to being there. It's going to be, God knows, probably over 100 talent there, and it is a perfect opportunity for me to shake some hands, listen to some stories, tell some people, thank you for giving me the career that you did, because I went for a real long time, working every day, not being able to do any of these. And this is like a special weekend, and, can't wait to be there and see everybody. And all 3 days, man, it's going to be people from around the world coming to say hello and get a picture and tell some stories. So I really look forward to it.
Get your tickets now. Go to Dallas, Texas. Be a part of it. WrestleCon. Arn is going to be there, man. And I tell you, because I say this before you and I ever worked together at ad-free shows, I got to meet you a few times. One of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Takes time for the fan. Very gracious, very thankful. And it's an experience that you'll remember for the rest of your life. If you're a longtime Arn Anderson fan, you don't want to pass this opportunity up. So make sure you take advantage of this opportunity and go check out our man, Arn Anderson, at WrestleCon. It's going to be a big-time weekend, a big-time event around WrestleMania. I think Conrad's going to be there with a few other ad-free show hosts as well that weekend. So big-time event, Arn. So make sure you get your tickets to check all that out. The other thing I want to plug right before we head out of here, and that is adfreeshows.com. I know I mentioned it earlier on, but that's where you're going to get bonus Arn. And I mentioned the War Games 1 and 2. We just put that in the can. That should be out this past week, where you can watch War Games 1 and 2. To the voices of Arn and Conrad, it don't get much better than that. Listen to their live commentary. Listen to Arn relive stories and memories of that time period while he was in that cage. Always the man starting those War Games matches. So check it out now. Become a member over at adfreeshows.com. So Arn, with that, we appreciate all of you joining us this week. Tell your friends to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you again right here next week on Arn.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.